A man ought to remember the night he gets himself a wife. Those were the first words Ethan Cole heard when he opened his eyes. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. Morning had not yet reached the windows. The cabin was blue with that cold hour before sunrise, when the fire had burned low and every shadow seemed to belong to something waiting. Cedar smoke hung beneath the rafters. His ribs ached when he breathed. His mouth tasted of blood and dust. Then he noticed the woman. She sat beside the hearth with her back against the wall, asleep but not peacefully. One hand rested near a knife at her belt. Long black hair fell over one shoulder. Firelight touched the bronze warmth of her face, catching the faint red line of a scar near her temple. Apache. Ethan stopped breathing for half a second. Then he looked down. A turquoise bracelet circled his left wrist. He had never owned turquoise in his life. Across the room, Walter Briggs stood in the open doorway, hat in both hands, wearing the expression of a man trying very hard not to laugh at a funeral. "What happened?" Ethan asked. Walter glanced at the woman, then at the bracelet, then back at Ethan. "Well," he said slowly, "depends how much of it you remember." Ethan pushed himself upright. Pain drove through his side like a hot nail. Nothing. He remembered rain, a horse screaming somewhere in the dark, Aiyana's voice, then hands pulling him through mud. After that, only blackness. Outside the cabin came the soft creak of leather. Ethan turned toward the window. His body went still. Horses filled the yard. Not 3, not 10, dozens. Apache riders stood beyond the fence in complete silence, their shapes dark against the paling eastern sky. No shouting, no rifles raised, no threat spoken. That made it worse. Men who came to kill you usually wanted you afraid. These men were waiting. Ethan swung his legs over the bed. The movement woke the woman. Her eyes opened instantly. Dark, steady. Aiyana. She looked first at his face, then at his wrist. Something unreadable passed through her expression. "You are awake," she said. Ethan lifted his arm. "What is this?" Her gaze remained on the turquoise. "You do not remember?" "No." Outside, one of the horses stamped the frozen ground. Walter cleared his throat. Ethan ignored him. "What happened last night?" Aiyana rose slowly. The room seemed smaller with her standing in it. She crossed the floor until only a few feet separated them. No fear in her face. No apology either. "You chose," she said. Ethan stared at her. "I chose what?" For the first time, something almost like amusement touched her eyes. Walter made a small sound behind them. Ethan turned. The old innkeeper rubbed his jaw. "Cole," he said, "half the valley thinks you saved an Apache chief." Ethan waited. Walter looked toward Aiyana again. "And the other half thinks he rewarded you." Silence settled over the cabin. Heavy. Wrong. Ethan slowly looked back at the woman. Aiyana did not lower her eyes. Walter finally said it. "Reckon by sunrise, folks are going to be calling her your Apache bride." Ethan felt the bracelet tighten around his wrist, though it had not moved. Outside, 40 riders waited in silence. Inside, Aiyana watched him as if the next thing he said mattered more than anything that had happened the night before. And Ethan Cole understood one thing clearly. Whatever he had done in the storm, he had awakened inside a story everyone else already believed. 12 hours earlier, Ethan Cole had been riding toward trouble without knowing its name. The dust storm came down from the western ridge like a wall. One moment, the trail was clear. The next, the whole world turned copper. Dust filled Ethan's mouth. It rasped against his coat and hissed across the saddle leather. His gelding lowered its head and fought the wind while Ethan pulled his bandana over his nose. Then he heard wood cracking somewhere ahead. Not thunder. A wagon. Ethan followed the sound into a dry wash where an overturned freight wagon lay on its side, half buried by blowing sand. 3 figures moved around it. Apache. A young woman stood near the broken wheel, one hand pressed against a bleeding cut above her brow. Another man was trying to lift the wagon frame. The third was underneath it. Old. Pinned. Ethan reined in. 2 white settlers had already stopped on the ridge above. One of them squinted down at the scene and spat into the dust. "Leave him, Cole." Ethan looked at him. "Ain't our trouble," the man added. Below, the young Apache woman saw Ethan. Her body tightened. Her hand moved toward the knife at her waist. Ethan raised one palm. Then he dismounted. No speech. No promise. He walked past the settlers and down into the wash. The old man under the wagon was conscious, but barely. Blood had darkened the earth beneath his shoulder. Ethan crouched, studied the axle, then pulled the rope from his saddle. The young woman stepped between him and the old man. Her eyes were hard, suspicious. "You touch him wrong," she said in careful English. "You answer to me." Ethan met her stare. "Then help me lift." That stopped her. Only for a second. The wind screamed over the wash. Sand stung their faces. Ethan looped the rope around the broken frame, tied the other end to his saddle horn, then motioned for the second Apache man to brace the wheel. Now, the horse pulled. Wood groaned. The wagon rose 3 inches. Not enough. Ethan wrapped both hands around the frame and lifted with everything he had. Pain tore through his side. The young woman dropped beside her father and dragged him clear. "Move," Ethan barked. She pulled harder. The old man rolled free just as the rope snapped. The wagon crashed back into the sand. Ethan went down with it. For a moment, all he heard was wind. Then the woman was beside him. She pressed a hand to his ribs. "You are hurt. I've been better." Her father coughed behind them. Alive. That was enough. By sundown, the storm had weakened. They sheltered beneath a stone shelf while Ethan shared the last of his water. The old man studied him for a long time. "My name is Red Hawk," he said. Ethan nodded once. "Ethan Cole." Red Hawk glanced toward his daughter. "This is Aiyana." Her eyes never left Ethan. Not with gratitude. Not yet. Red Hawk reached beneath his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. Silver clinked inside. "For what you did." Ethan pushed the pouch back. "No," Red Hawk frowned. "You saved my life." Ethan looked toward the dying storm. "Then keep it alive." Aiyana's expression changed. Only slightly. But enough. Because greed, she understood. Debt, she understood. A white cowboy refusing payment? That was something else entirely. By late afternoon, the storm had thinned into long curtains of dust. Ethan rode with Red Hawk's party toward a trading post built where 2 trails crossed the valley. The place was little more than a water trough, a stable, and a low wooden building with a porch sagging toward the earth. Silas Mercer was already there. He leaned against a post in a clean black coat, silver watch chain bright against his vest. Mercer noticed the Apache riders first. Then Ethan. His smile came slowly. "Well now." Ethan dismounted. Red Hawk did the same. Aiyana stayed near her father. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, tobacco, sweat, and old pine boards baked by years of summer heat. Red Hawk placed the leather pouch on the counter. Silver touched wood. "For the cowboy," he said. Ethan looked at it. "No," Mercer laughed from behind him. Not loudly. That made it meaner. Red Hawk studied Ethan. "You refused before." Still refusing. The older man reached outside and pointed toward a strong gray mare tied near the rail. Then the horse. Ethan glanced at the animal. Fine chest. Good legs. Worth more than anything he owned except his land. "No," Mercer pushed away from the wall. "Cole, you always been this foolish." Ethan said nothing. Mercer stepped closer to the gray mare, inspecting it like the decision belonged to him. A man hands you silver, you take silver. Offers you horse flesh, you take the horse. He looked at Aiyana. "Unless there's something else you're waiting on." The room changed. Not much. Just enough. Aiyana's shoulders stiffened. Red Hawk's jaw tightened. Ethan turned slowly. Mercer smiled. "Didn't mean offense." "You did." Ethan's voice was quiet. Mercer's smile faded at the edges. A cup of water sat untouched on the counter near Ethan's hand. Aiyana stepped forward. The trader behind the counter looked at her, then at Mercer, then away. "No service," he muttered. Aiyana understood. Her expression did not change. That was what made it worse. She turned toward the door. Ethan picked up the cup. For 1 second, everyone thought he might throw it. He didn't. He walked past Mercer, followed Aiyana outside, and placed the water in her hands. Simple as that. Mercer gave a short laugh. "Kindness don't feed cattle, Cole." Ethan sat on the porch step beside Aiyana. Dust moved across the yard in thin red sheets. "No," he said. "Wasn't selling it." No one answered. Not Red Hawk. Not Mercer. Not the trader. Aiyana looked down at the cup between her hands. Then at Ethan. Something in her eyes had changed again. Not gratitude. Something quieter. Something more dangerous. Respect. When the Apache party prepared to leave, Ethan tightened his saddle straps. He did not notice Aiyana standing behind him. Did not see the narrow strip of braided leather in her fingers. She tied it beneath the saddle horn with one careful knot. Then another. A small thing. Barely visible. Ethan mounted and rode away without ever looking down. But Red Hawk saw it, and when his eyes met his daughter's across the dusty yard, neither of them spoke. Some choices did not need words. Not yet. The first lie reached Ethan before the rain did. He heard hoofbeats behind him less than a mile from his ranch. 3 riders. Mercer's men. They stayed far enough back to pretend they were not following. Close enough to make the message clear. Ethan kept riding. The leather knot beneath his saddle horn shifted with every step, still unnoticed. Ahead, the sky had turned the color of old iron. Lightning flickered over the eastern ridge. Then Ethan saw tracks cutting away from the main trail. Fresh. Apache horses. He slowed. Another set crossed them. Shot horses. White men. Too many. Something was wrong. Ethan turned his gelding toward the wash. The first drop of rain struck his hat like a coin. Then another. By the time he found Red Hawk's party, the storm had broken open. Water came sideways. Aiyana stood beneath a cottonwood, one hand on her father's arm. 4 armed men blocked the trail ahead. Mercer's men. One of them was smiling. You folks took something that belongs to Mr. Mercer. Red Hawk's face hardened. We took nothing. Then this'll be simple. The man reached for his rifle. Ethan rode between them. Leave. The rider looked up. Cole. Ride home. A second man spat into the mud. Not your concern. Ethan almost laughed. He had heard that sentence before. Instead, he dismounted. No gun drawn. No threat. Just boots sinking into wet earth. Funny thing, he said. People keep deciding that for me. The first man raised the rifle. Not at Ethan. At Red Hawk. Aiyana moved. So did Ethan. The stock of the rifle caught him beneath the ribs. White pain exploded through his side. He staggered. Then another blow struck his temple. The world tilted. Rain became noise. Mud became sky. He heard Aiyana shout his name. Then nothing. When Ethan opened his eyes again, he was no longer outside. Firelight moved above him. His shirt had been cut open at the ribs. Aiyana knelt beside him. Her hands were red with his blood. Stay still. Where? Your cabin. He tried to rise. Pain stopped him. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. Aiyana pressed folded cloth against his side. You should have let them pass. They would have killed him. Maybe. Her voice sharpened. And maybe they would have killed you instead. Ethan looked at her. Didn't. That almost made her smile. Almost. The fever came after midnight. He drifted in and out while Aiyana fed cedar to the fire and changed the cloth against his wound. At some point, she removed a turquoise bracelet from her own wrist. Old silver. Blue stone worn smooth by years of touch. She held it for a long moment, then tied it around Ethan's wrist. Protection. A promise within her family. Nothing more. But the braided leather knot still hung from Ethan's saddle outside. And together, to the wrong eyes, they meant something else. Near dawn, horses arrived. Then more. Red Hawk's relatives gathered beyond the fence. One elder saw the bracelet through the window. Another noticed the knot on the saddle. Neither spoke. They did not have to. By sunrise, Walter Briggs was already riding up the road. And before Ethan ever opened his eyes, the valley had decided what had happened. By noon, the rumor had outrun every horse in the valley. Ethan heard it from Walter first, then from the stable boy, then from a ranch hand who rode past the fence grinning like he had discovered gold. Morning, Cole. The man tipped his hat toward Aiyana. Morning, Mrs. Cole. Ethan's jaw tightened. Aiyana said nothing. She stood beneath the cottonwood, washing blood from a strip of cloth in a tin basin. The turquoise bracelet was still around Ethan's wrist. He had tried removing it once. The knot held tight. By the third attempt, he stopped. Walter leaned against the porch post. You ought to know, folks in town are saying Red Hawk paid his debt. Ethan looked at him. With what? Walter's eyes moved toward Aiyana. Ethan went still. For a moment, even the wind seemed to quiet. No, Walter lifted both hands. I'm only telling you what they're saying. Ethan stepped off the porch. His ribs protested. He ignored them. Aiyana heard his boots and looked up. He stopped several feet away. I need to ask you something. You already are. Ethan glanced toward Walter. The old man understood and disappeared inside. Ethan lowered his voice. They think your father gave you to me. Aiyana's face changed. Not fear. Not embarrassment. Anger. Cold and immediate. Ethan continued before she could speak. I didn't save him for that. Her eyes sharpened. I know. I wouldn't take that kind of payment. Payment. The word cut harder than shouting. Aiyana stood. Water ran from her hands onto the dust. You believe I am something a man can hand across a table? No, you said payment. I said I wouldn't take it. That is not the same thing. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. She stepped closer. I am not your reward, Ethan Cole. The words landed clean. He nodded once. Good. That surprised her. Ethan looked at the bracelet on his wrist. Then tell me what this means. Aiyana's anger faded slightly. She reached for his hand. Her fingers stopped just before touching him. It means protection. Walter says people think otherwise. Walter talks too much. Despite himself, Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Then hoofbeats rolled across the yard. Red Hawk approached with 6 riders. He dismounted slowly. Ethan faced him. Did you promise her to me? Red Hawk's expression became unreadable. No. The answer came without hesitation. Ethan looked at Aiyana. Red Hawk continued. My daughter is not mine to promise. Silence. That should have ended it. Instead, it made the question larger. Ethan glanced toward the riders still waiting beyond the fence. Then why are they here? Red Hawk looked at Aiyana. This time, she answered. Because I asked them to stay. Ethan stared at her. Why? Aiyana finally touched the bracelet. Her thumb passed over the worn turquoise. I put my family's protection on you. For saving your father? No, the word was soft. He waited. Aiyana looked toward the road leading back to town. You saved him when no one was watching. Then she met Ethan's eyes. I stayed to see what kind of man you would be when everyone was. The test was never meant for Ethan. He understood that 3 days later. Silas Mercer arrived before noon with 2 riders behind him and a folded contract tucked beneath his coat. Aiyana saw them first. She was sitting beneath the porch awning, grinding dried sage between 2 stones while Ethan repaired a split fence rail. Mercer dismounted slowly. Clean boots. Clean gloves. The kind of man who could ride through mud and somehow leave the dirt for somebody else. Cole. Ethan kept working. Mercer. Silas glanced toward Aiyana. She's still here. The hammer stopped. Just once. Then continued. What do you want? Mercer smiled. Business. He removed the folded paper. Ethan recognized it immediately. The cattle contract. Winter supply rights. Grazing access. Credit at the trading post. Without it, his ranch might survive summer. It would not survive January. Mercer held it between 2 fingers. I can make yesterday disappear. Ethan looked at him. Mercer nodded toward Aiyana. Send her back. Aiyana's hand stopped over the sage. She did not turn around. Mercer continued. Folks are nervous. An Apache woman living under a white man's roof makes people wonder where his loyalties sit. She doesn't live under my roof. Good. Mercer smiled wider. Then it ought to be easy. Ethan set the hammer down. Behind Mercer, 1 rider shifted in his saddle. Leather creaked. A fly buzzed near the water trough. Nothing else moved. What happens if I don't? Mercer unfolded the contract. No. Cattle market. Ethan said nothing. No credit. Still nothing. No feed come winter. Mercer stepped closer. You'll lose this place before the first hard freeze. Aiyana finally looked at Ethan. There was no pleading in her face. That bothered him more than pleading would have. She had expected this. Later, he would understand why. Her mother had once trusted settlers who smiled while offering protection. They had promised safety, then demanded obedience as payment. Before she died, she had told Aiyana one thing she never forgot. Do not listen to what a man promises when he wants something. Watch what he gives up when there is nothing to gain. That was why Aiyana had stayed. Not to see whether Ethan would protect her with a gun. Any fool could reach for iron. She wanted to know what he would surrender without one. Mercer held out the contract. One choice, Cole. Ethan took the paper. Silas relaxed. For half a second, triumph touched his face. Then Ethan tore the contract down the middle. Once. Twice. The pieces fell into the dust. Mercer stared at them. You know what you just threw away? Ethan looked toward his cattle. Then the weathered barn. Then the roof he had spent 8 years repairing with his own hands. I reckon I do. Mercer's face hardened. All this for her. Ethan looked at Aiyana. No, that answer surprised everyone. Even her. Ethan wiped his hands on his trousers. This is for me. Mercer mounted without another word. The riders followed him toward town. Only when the dust disappeared did Aiyana rise. You may lose your ranch. Ethan picked up his hammer. Maybe. You did not have to do that. No, he drove a nail into the rail. One clean strike. Then another. Aiyana watched him quietly. The turquoise bracelet caught the sunlight on his wrist. And for the first time since she had tied it there, she understood something her mother had never told her. Sometimes trust did not begin when a man promised to stay. Sometimes it began when he was given every reason to leave, and simply didn't. Silas Mercer did not come back alone. By sunset, dust was rising from the southern road. Ethan saw it from the porch. At first, 5 riders. Then 12. Then more behind them. Aiyana stepped beside him. How many? Ethan narrowed his eyes. Enough. The first group stopped outside the fence. Men from town. Ranch hands. Shopkeepers. 2 miners Ethan recognized. None of them looked eager to be there. That made them more dangerous. Men who hated you were simple. Men who were afraid of looking weak could be convinced to do almost anything. Mercer rode at the front. He raised one hand. Cole. Ethan did not answer. Mercer looked past him toward Aiyana. You were warned. Aiyana's face remained calm. Ethan stepped off the porch. The cattle shifted nervously behind the barn. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Mercer pointed toward the ridge. Folks say Apache riders are gathering. As if summoned by the words, movement appeared against the western sky. 1 horse. Then another. Then 20. Red Hawk's people crested the ridge in silence. No war cries. No rifles raised. Just riders. Watching. The men from town began reaching for weapons. Ethan felt the valley tighten around them. 1 insult had become 20 men. 20 had become nearly 200 witnesses divided by fear. Aiyana moved closer. If 1 gun fires, she said quietly, they will all remember only the blood. Ethan knew she was right. Mercer smiled when he saw the Apache riders. There it was. The thing he wanted. Not justice. Proof. He wanted fear to do what hatred could not. See, Mercer shouted. They came for us. Red Hawk did not move. Neither did his riders. Ethan walked toward the open ground between both sides. Mercer frowned. Cole. Ethan kept walking. His hand rested near his revolver. Half the town saw it. So did every Apache rider. The silence grew sharp. Then Ethan unbuckled his gun belt. Mercer's smile vanished. Ethan lowered it slowly. Placed the revolver in the dirt. No speech. No challenge. Just iron touching dust. Aiyana watched him. Then she stepped forward. Her knife came free from its sheath. Several townsmen flinched. She turned the blade in her hand and laid it beside Ethan's revolver. 2 weapons. 2 peoples. Neither fired. Red Hawk lowered his hand from his rifle. 1 by 1, the riders behind him did the same. Across the field, a rancher named Tom Bell slowly released his grip on his pistol. Then another man. Then another. Mercer looked around. His control was slipping. You think putting down a gun makes her one of us? He shouted. Ethan looked at him. No, Mercer sneered. Then what is she? Ethan turned toward Aiyana. For a moment, he said nothing. That silence carried farther than a gunshot. She is herself. Aiyana's eyes shifted toward him. Mercer laughed once. Cold. You threw away your livelihood for an Apache woman, and now you stand here pretending she belongs nowhere. Ethan looked toward the ridge, then toward the town. No, he faced Mercer again. I'm saying neither side gets to decide who she belongs to. The wind moved across the field. Dust curled around the revolver and the knife. Aiyana stared at Ethan, and somewhere behind Mercer, a man lowered his gun completely. Then another. The valley had not chosen peace yet, but for the first time that day, it had stopped choosing war. Mercer's last weapon was not the revolver at his hip. It was shame. He stepped into the open ground and looked from Ethan to Aiyana, then toward the men behind him. You hear that? He called. His voice carried across the valley. Cole says she belongs to nobody. A few men shifted. Mercer smiled. He knew exactly where to press. So tell us, cowboy. He turned back toward Ethan. What did you throw your ranch away for? Ethan said nothing. Mercer pointed at Aiyana. For her. Still nothing. Mercer's smile sharpened. Or did the Apache chief already give her to you? Aiyana's face went still. Red Hawk's riders tightened behind her. Mercer saw it and pushed harder. Maybe that bracelet means what folks say it means. He looked toward the turquoise on Ethan's wrist. Maybe she's your reward after all. The word hung there. Reward. A thing earned. A thing handed over. A thing owned. Ethan looked at Aiyana, then at the bracelet. Slowly, he lifted his wrist. She isn't mine. The words landed wrong at first. Aiyana's eyes changed. Not anger. Something quieter. Something wounded. Even Red Hawk turned his head. Mercer laughed. There it is. But Ethan was not finished. Not unless she chooses to be. The valley went silent. No horse moved. No boot scraped dirt. Even the wind seemed to flatten against the grass. Ethan stepped away from the revolver at his feet. I didn't save her father to get paid. He looked at Red Hawk. I didn't stand beside her so your people would owe me. Then he faced Mercer. And I sure as hell didn't tear up that contract because I wanted to own somebody. Aiyana stared at him. Ethan's voice dropped. What she does next is hers. That was all. No plea. No promise. No reaching for her hand. Just room. Aiyana looked toward her father. Red Hawk did not nod. Did not command. He simply watched his daughter. Then she looked at Mercer. At the townsmen. At the Apache riders. At the knife lying in the dirt beside Ethan's gun. Finally, she looked at Ethan. Aiyana walked forward. One step. Then another. She stopped close enough to touch him. Her fingers moved to his wrist. For one terrible second, Ethan thought she meant to take the bracelet back. Maybe that was right. Maybe it had always belonged with her. She untied the turquoise. The cord slipped free. Mercer smiled again. Too soon. Aiyana held the bracelet between them. Then she wrapped it around Ethan's wrist once more. Tighter this time. Her fingers tied the knot carefully. Deliberately. When she finished, she did not let go. Now, she said. Her voice was quiet. But everyone heard it. I choose. Mercer's face emptied. Behind her, Red Hawk lowered his head. Not in surrender. In respect. One Apache rider relaxed his shoulders. Then another. Across the field, a townsman removed his hand from his gun belt. Another followed. The tension did not break all at once. It drained slowly. Like storm water leaving hard ground. Ethan looked down at Aiyana's hand still resting over his. He could have kissed her. He didn't. Not there. Not in front of men who still thought love was another kind of claim. Instead, he turned his hand beneath hers and held it. Nothing more. Nothing less. And that simple movement did what 200 armed men had failed to do. It ended the argument. 3 weeks later, no one in the valley called it a reward anymore. Morning came soft over Ethan Cole's ranch. The light touched the fence posts first. Then the barn roof. Then the repaired well standing near the road. That well had once belonged only to Ethan. Now 2 buckets hung from the beam. One for anyone who came from town. One for anyone who came from the western ridge. Most days, nobody spoke about the difference. That was how Ethan preferred it. He stood near the south fence with a hammer in one hand and a bent nail between his teeth. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Aiyana stepped onto the porch carrying 2 tin cups. Coffee. Strong enough to wake the dead. Ethan looked toward her. She wore the same turquoise bracelet around his wrist. Not hers. His. A small thing. But out here, small things could carry more weight than rifles. Their wedding had happened 6 days earlier. No crowd. No shouting. No preacher standing above them. Red Hawk had come with 4 riders. Walter Briggs had come with his wife. They stood beneath the cottonwoods while Ethan and Aiyana made the only promises that mattered. No ownership. No debt. No reward. Only choice. Walter rode up the road just before noon. He slowed when he saw Ethan mending the fence and Aiyana hanging sage beneath the porch. Well, he called, there's the famous husband. Ethan pulled the nail from his mouth. Morning, Walter. Walter dismounted and grinned. Still can't believe how all this started. Aiyana handed Ethan one of the cups. He took it. Walter leaned against the fence. Cole, after everything you went through, I suppose you finally got your reward. Ethan looked at him. Then, toward the road. A group of Apache travelers had stopped at the well. A white ranch family waited behind them. No one argued over who drank first. A little boy held the rope while an Apache girl filled the bucket. Ethan watched them for a moment. Then he looked back at Walter. No, Walter raised an eyebrow. Ethan nodded toward Aiyana. She did. Aiyana heard him. She turned slowly. Walter tried not to smile. Ethan already knew he had said the wrong thing. Aiyana walked across the yard. Her boots stirred pale dust around the hem of her dress. She stopped beside him. We did, she said. Ethan considered that, then nodded. We did. Walter laughed once and climbed back into the saddle. As he rode away, Ethan returned to the fence. One nail. One strike. Then another. Aiyana stood beside him, drinking her coffee. No grand speech followed. No one rode in with silver. No warriors knelt. No town gathered to apologize. Silas Mercer's old sign still lay face down near the abandoned trading road, half covered by dust. Some men still stared when Aiyana entered town. Some Apache riders still watched Ethan carefully when he crossed the Western Trail. Trust had not arrived all at once. Nothing worth keeping ever did. Late that evening, Ethan stepped inside the cabin. His revolver hung on a peg near the door. He passed it without touching it. Outside, Aiyana called his name. He turned. The last sunlight caught the turquoise around his wrist, blue against weathered skin. A choice, not a chain. Ethan walked back onto the porch. Aiyana held out her hand. He took it, and as the wind moved through the cottonwoods, the valley settled into silence. The kind that came after a storm. The kind that did not ask who had won, only who had decided not to fight.